Welcome to the Plant-Based Podcast. Did you know that plants are truly amazing? Not only can you grow them and eat them, you can also wear them, drink them, nourish your skin with them, and so much more. Let Ellen and Michael inspire you to love plants as much as they do, as they chat with the movers and shakers in this wonderful plant-based world. So, let's dig in.
The tranquil, soothing, natural sound of flowing water. Listening to it has been shown to lower your heart rate and blood pressure and gently relax your whole body. Combining the magical sound of cascading water with the beauty of plants, Hydria Life now enable you to enjoy these same health and well-being benefits at home or in the garden. Get 10% off their rechargeable Hydria fountain at hydrialife.com when you quote code PLANT24 on ordering. That's PLANT24 on ordering. Hi everyone, Ellen Mary here. In this week's episode, I get to chat with the incredibly talented Giulio Giorgi, who is the designer for one of the new show gardens at RHS Chelsea this year. The garden is part of the Sanctuary category, and it's named World Child Cancer's Nurturing Garden. And it's a garden designed for children with cancer and their families to bring them joy and escapism, through the amazing experiences that you can have with nature. So I'm sure it's going to be a really inspirational garden, but I'm going to let you decide what you think after you hear Giulio on this episode. He is so talented, absolutely lovely, and I can't wait to meet him also in person at Chelsea this year. So after you listen to this episode, get your tickets booked for RHS Chelsea and please go and say hello to him and congratulate him, hopefully on his amazing garden, and for such a good cause as well. Don't worry, Michael will be back next week. We'll be back with another episode between both of us, and until then, happy gardening.
Okay, so welcome to the podcast, Giulio. I'm really excited to chat with you today about your RHS Chelsea garden.
Hi, Ellen. I'm also really excited to share this with you.
Good. I'm really pleased to have you here. Chelsea is just, a world garden show, isn't it? It's a world-class garden show. People from all over the world come to see it. And I've had a look at your garden that's coming up and it looks excellent. So I can't wait to find out more about it. And it's for such an amazing cause as well. But first of all, before we get into the garden and telling us all about that, I'd love to know a little bit more about you. How did your love of, gardening and plants and nature begin? Take us back to the beginning.
Well, the beginning is, I would say, almost 35 years ago. I'm about 40. And it was at my grandmother's farm. Both my grandmothers were land farmers. And so I used to spend a lot of time there. My parents, they were working, basically my grandmothers were my babysitters. And they went to school for a very short time, but they knew everything about planting, growing, and just keeping the farm, which were very traditional Italian farms, growing like an orchard, a vegetable garden, keeping all sorts of animals, and then crops, of course. So a very mixed growing environment. And I remember that my grandmother, she used to grow a small garden just for herself, just to grow flowers, just for her pleasure. And my very first memory is her telling me that she got some Dutch tulips from some friends that went to to Holland, and she planted them, and they were just very traditional, this very big red tulips. And I was just like sticking my nose inside the tulip, and then she would clean the pollen out of the tip of my nose, and I would smell it, because actually, it's like ancient varieties, they do smell. They have this very watery scent, and I just have this image of her cleaning my nose and just laughing at me holding this red tulip.
That's so cute.
I think this was the beginning, like, of becoming very interested and passionate about growing stuff and plants.
Getting really up close and personal with the plants there. There's so many guests who come on the podcast and we ask, where did it all begin for you? And you can guarantee that 90% of people will go back to childhood, being with their parents or their grandparents, and often grandparents specifically, outside gardening, growing food, or being out there on the land. So it's so important, isn't it, for children to engage in nature, because they can take that with them throughout their life.
Definitely. I completely agree with you. And plus, it works very well for hyperactive kids, as I was, because it really keeps them occupied.
That's so true. I mean, there's like a world of discovery out there in the garden, isn't there? Picking up stones even, and looking at all the creatures underneath, and looking up close at the detail of plants, and climbing trees and all those kind of things. It's just marvelous. So it sounds wonderful. And were you in Italy as well at the time?
Where was I?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, my family comes from the northern part. So it's this big flat land close to Verona, just to British people, Romeo and Juliet, Verona. It's, it's known, but it's definitely not the very picturesque Italian landscape that we can imagine. For instance, the one from Tuscany. It's much more, flat and boring, but of course, once you know it, it's just as beautiful as the other.
There's beauty in all landscape, whether it's flat or mountainous or anything else. I'm from a place called Norfolk in the UK, and if I remember correctly, I think it was William Shakespeare who said how flat Norfolk was, like how boring he thought it was. Someone's going to tell me it wasn't William Shakespeare now, and it was William Wordsworth or something, but I'm pretty sure that it was Shakespeare who said something about it just being completely flat. But there's so much beauty in that, in any landscape anywhere. So when did you decide to study landscaping? When did you decide to make this your career?
Well, it really came progressively, because my first idea, once I was finished with high school, what I did is I went to an agricultural university, because I wanted to work more into international cooperation and development projects. And I thought, okay, they really, like, when you know about agriculture and sustainable agriculture, it's a great skill to share, also in diplomacy and an international context. And that's what I did. And then I started working in international organic agricultural programs. And it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot of things. I was going to visit farmers to check their activities, whether they were conform to the organic agriculture standards. So I did learn a lot, but I also felt some kind of frustration, because I'm basically, I'm a creative person and I need that on a daily basis. And so while I was working, I did another course. I was accepted at the landscape school in Versailles, which is really by the castle of and the park of Versailles. And this is where I really got passionate about landscape architecture and garden design. And ever since, this has been my job.
So you're kind of mixing your agricultural qualifications with your creativity as well, with landscaping. Those both come into play, don't they? So that's amazing. You teach as well, don't you?
Yeah. So the fact that I was already an expert into agricultural sustainable practices allowed me to quickly have a position at Versailles Landscape School right after I finished the courses. And then I started being asked at mostly it's architecture and design universities in Paris and in France, where I do hold workshops and courses about what I generally define as environmental design. So for me, it's a mission to work with these students that very often, since they are more of like architect and designers type, they know very little about plants and living things. And they need to learn that these are not just objects that you can design and place where you want. They have their own life, and you have to learn how to design with that.
Yeah, I love that. There was a study done, you probably know about it, I'm sure, but for listeners, a few years back now, where many people living in urban environments were asked to tell the researcher what they could see. And they said buildings, cars, people, mobile phones, but no one said plants. No, like barely anyone said trees or plants, but like they're living things. Do you know what I mean? They're like part of what we are and what we do. And I always find that really amazing, called plant blindness. So we don't want any plant blindness. RHS Chelsea is definitely not plant blind. It is full of plants and beautifully, chosen and designed and landscaped in a way that they're not individual plants. They're all brought together, aren't they, in order to create this wonderful garden. And Giulio, you are within the sanctuary category at RHS Chelsea. And it's a nurturing garden, isn't it, for children with cancer. So I'd just love to talk to you more about that, about your choice, why and how, and tell us about the garden. First and foremost, I think we know the answer, but why RHS Chelsea? Why are you designing for that show?
So the idea is that here in France, where my studio is based, sometimes as a garden designer, you can get a little bit, how could I say, claustrophobic, maybe. It's just because I guess this can happen pretty much in every country. You get to know the people, you know what the contents are, you know what the design styles are. And yet, as a designer, you need to learn more. So you turn yourself to other countries to see what the differences are. And it's always enriching. So I just thought, okay, here in France, I know pretty much what it is about. But in England, there is, and just the English-speaking world, there is a lot going on. And that we have to learn from. And me, myself, I have to learn from as well. So I thought, why not just trying out this show? Because I did some show in France. There is a very big festival called Chaumont. But it's so different, very differently organized, very different garden size and everything. There's nothing in common. So I just tried, and the relationship with World Child Cancer really worked out very well. We really understood each other, and we had a very similar vision of what this garden should be. And it worked very well with Project Giving Back that is financing us. So this is how it went.
So 2024 is a big year because, a show garden at RHS Chelsea is just completely phenomenal. It's like a garden show that you will never experience anywhere else. It's really quite something. It's an exciting place to be. So it's really, really cool. So tell us about the garden. Why did you design it? What's the garden all about?
Yeah. I felt very involved in the theme of the garden. Because I had some experiences of sharing my life with people that were undergoing cancer treatment. So I knew a little bit of maybe how can people feel during these periods. And I really wanted to create a place that could represent a safe place, could give tranquility, and also could allow you to live in the very moment, and could allow you to live a moment outside the hospital room and just be able to reconnect with living creatures. And I actually do think that sometimes it's easier to reconnect with non-human living creatures because they don't ask you anything. They don't talk. They can be beautiful. And I think that plants have an amazing role to play in this. So I thought, okay, let's create a place that is like a nest when people can just escape from this hard world that can be the one of cancer treatment. And also, especially, of course, for kids. So they really need to be in the moment. So what it is about, it's about senses. So this is how the idea of a sensory garden came about. So touch plants, there's lots of plants that are really, really pleasant, really velvety, for instance, to touch, to smell. I am really personally passionate about smells and perfume, and I do work a lot with scented planting schemes. So I was like, okay, we have a whole lot of plants to make like that we can show as they have amazing scents. And of course, as well, listening to the noises of the wind in the branches and the leaves and tasting a lot of edibles. So I tried to organize the garden about this journey in the plant world. And at the same time, I wanted to also show something that is really related to what World Child Cancer does in the world and the people they work with. And so this is why I chose terracotta and brick as the one and only building material for the garden. This is just because it's clay. It's something that you find all over the world. It's the simplest thing you can use to build. And it's the most ecological, one of the most ecological ones. So the challenge was also to say, I am building a garden for the Chelsea Flower Show, which means it's an ephemeral garden, which means that this garden needs to be created, built, and then broken down. And there should be no waste. How can I do it? And this is why I went into terracotta and I designed this kind of bricks that really work like Lego blocks. So you can, stack them and you can build with them. And then you can also break them down without them breaking. And it's very playful, just the process. So, yeah.
That sounds amazing.
That was the two ideas.
No, it's wonderful. Like that's like Lego and also children. It's like you're doing something like children play with Lego, although I know some adults play with Lego also. So it's kind of, is there a difference, do you think, with designing a garden specifically for adults and children? Is there like when you're designing, are you thinking specifically about children? Would you have designed it different if it was for adults with cancer? How have you kind of implemented that into the design?
Yes, I think there is one big difference. If you think when you were a child, I at least I have this memory that when I was a child, everything seemed much bigger than what it is as we are. So I think that the designer really has a task of knowing what is the right dimension of things, of the constructions, and also which plants should come and sort of caress the children as they walk by, and what plants can sort of capture their attention. So with adults, it's a different thing because adults are more constructed intellectually and they're often looking for some specific experiences in gardening. So when I work with adults, it's more of a dialogue process with them beforehand. With kids, of course, that's important as well. But I know that you have to create their own little world. And when it works, you see that they are completely crazy. They just want to go and touch everywhere and they are completely enthusiastic. And it's a huge satisfaction when you see that.
Yeah, I bet it is. I bet that's absolutely lovely. Tell us a little bit about the actual garden design, like the movement through the garden, like how have you designed it?
So it has a very concentric space. So it, as I was saying before, it's like a nest. So there is a path that basically goes around within the garden and then goes until the center, which will have a seat for families to find a very shelter place to rest and to spend time within the plants. But what's very specific about this garden is that there is this system of raised beds built with this clay blocks. And why raised beds? For two reasons. One is that so I can bring the plants at the height of children of different ages, so different heights. And, when plants are closer, and you can also see a little bit of the beginning of the root system, you can see the stems, you can see the underneath of the leaf. When they get closer, the emotion is even stronger. And the second reason is that the whole concept is inspired by keyhole gardens, which is a design that has been invented in sub-Saharan Africa, and it has been invented for growing crops there where the soil is very compacted, where there is little availability of nutrients. And it's a very, very efficient design that was just born out of necessity of people needing to grow crops. And this is my main inspiration for it.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I mean, I've seen obviously some images and it looks wonderful. I can't wait to see it at the show. You mentioned earlier on about Project Giving Back being involved in helping with finance the garden. How does that work? How did you get involved with Project Giving Back? Can you tell us a little bit about them as well?
Sure. So actually, it was very simple because I was following the RHS on Instagram, and they published about Project Giving Back. So I started following Project Giving Back, and then I noticed that they opened up the call for the Chelsea gardens. And so I just did apply. I sent my CV, my portfolio. I had a chat with Patty from Project Giving Back that told me that actually they were open to international designers. So I was really happy. And then I matched with World Child Cancer, and we submitted our ideas, and we went through the whole selection process, which was amazing. I mean, it was so well organized, and the steps were very clear. So basically, it really worked like a competition. It takes quite a while because there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of ideas that have to be checked and have to be approved. But even just the process itself was a great learning experience.
That's wonderful. Project Giving Back, I think, have only been around for a few years now, and their impact at the show has been phenomenal. So that's really awesome. Have you been to the UK before?
This is my first garden in the UK.
Right. Okay. Wow. This is going to be an experience.
Definitely.
You mentioned before about obviously your terracotta kind of building blocks, and that you're going to be able to take them down without breaking them, which is awesome. What happens to the garden after you've broken it down? You said there's no waste, but is it going somewhere afterwards?
Yeah, definitely. This is a very important point for me. I remember that when I first got in touch with Project Giving Back, I was saying, how do I design a garden which is going to be very performing in the end of May? So, of course, you have to choose plants that do have flowers and are in complete bloom for that period. But as you know as well, when you design a garden, you have to think all the year long, which means that, in fact, like if you just take a super flowering Chelsea garden in another season, it might not work, and so it was really good to know since very early that the garden was going to be rebuilt entirely close to a hospital, and for our garden it's going to be in Bristol, and it's going to be close to the Royal Hospital for Children, and it's going to be built in the Click House. What's the Click House? It's a house which is run by this amazing charity which is called Young Lives versus Cancer, and they have 15 bedrooms that are offered to families so that they can stay together while their children undergo cancer treatment.
That's incredible. So the garden will be a true sanctuary, in years to come, for children and their families also, like somewhere to go, shift and be in the moment, be very present, like you said before. I think that's a really important aspect of designing a garden like this, isn't it? Just knowing that it, is going to improve people's lives. I think that's really awesome. It sounds really incredible. I'm really looking forward to seeing it at the show, and also you as well. It'd be great to meet you in person. Can you tell us where we can find out more about the garden? So for listeners, if they want to have a little sneak peek at the drawings, we can find it on the RHS website, I think. Is that right?
Yes. They have bespoke page on the RHS about the garden. And then I think it's good to follow Project Giving Back as well, because they do regular posts about the different gardens and stories. So I know that we're going to do some footage with them at the nursery where I'm growing the plants, which is Hortus Loci. And I think I'll have some footage as well about the 3D printing of the clay blocks. So there's going to be a lot of content on their site too.
Okay, that's really cool. And also, if listeners would like to follow you online, you said you were mentioned that you followed RHS and Project Giving Back online. So now we know that you're online. Can you give us your social media information?
Sure. Well, I have an Instagram, which is just with my name, Giulio, and then it's _, and then Giorgi, which is my family name. And I have a website as well, which is going to be completely remade for the Chelsea. So if you start looking at it right now, you will see a lot of changes going on.
That's cool. Everyone knows now. We'll put those details in the description to the podcast. So if you're listening to this and you didn't quite catch it, then you can read that in the description on this very episode. Thank you so much, Giulio. It's been a pleasure to chat with you and find out more about the garden and your inspiration behind it as well. So good luck at Chelsea. We are all going to go for gold for you. Let's get Giulio gold. Thank you very much. Thank you.
The tranquil, soothing, natural sound of flowing water. Listening to it has been shown to lower your heart rate and blood pressure and generally relax your whole body. Combining the magical sound of cascading water with the beauty of plants, Hydria Life will now enable you to use those same health and well-being effects at home or in the garden. Get 10% off their rechargeable Hydria fountain at hydrialife.com. All you need to do is quote the code PLANT24 when ordering.
The music for the Plant-Based podcast is part of the song Grow by Mikey James, and our editor is Gareth Patch of Semi Echo.